Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan, and today I've got Richard Savoie on the podcast. He's the CEO and the co-founder of Adiona Tech, a company that maximizes the efficiency of fleets of delivery vehicles. They optimize last mile delivery. We're going to be talking about logistics and the efficiency of logistics powered by AI. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ted. Very excited to be here.
And you are in Australia right now. You're in Sydney. Good morning, I should say, right?
Yes, thank you. Just barely. We're coming up on noon here in Sydney, and it's a lovely day. It's still summer here, so no complaints.
Pronounce your company name for us all and tell us in a nutshell what your company does.
Will do. So it's Adiona Tech, and Adiona is the Roman goddess of the return journey. So her and her sister were responsible for helping school children get back and forth safely. And we started our company a few years ago with the goal of bringing decarbonization to underserved areas of logistics by way of financial efficiency. And that's just a fancy way of saying that logistics and supply chain businesses have a lot of waste in their systems, especially in where we specialize with delivery and last mile delivery. There's a lot of inefficiency there. And by reducing that inefficiency with a financial lens, really suiting the CFO, we have this beautiful low-cost way of also decarbonizing transport, which is the second largest emitting sector. So that's what we're really trying to tie together.
And as an example, one of your clients in Australia is Coca-Cola, right? So they've got lots and lots of trucks that are running around making lots and lots of deliveries. Is that sort of a business delivery service as compared to like Amazon trucks that are now running around supporting households?
Well, we operate with both B2B and B2C, so companies that are doing deliveries to other businesses. And so typical verticals would be FMCG, that's fast-moving consumer goods, which Coke is a part of. PepsiCo is also a customer of ours in similar vein. And other types of companies that deliver beer and wine and restaurant supplies, cafes, food. Cold chain is a big sector for us. And you can imagine how many movements there are of refrigerated food and produce going around all over the world all the time. A huge, huge sector. But then, other things like parcels. So those would be B2C, direct, to consumers like Amazon. Australia Post, which is the 7th largest postal organization in the world by revenue, is a customer of ours. So you can imagine the number of parcels that are being delivered to residences and businesses every day. And, to your question, that diversity is something that AI is, really a key component of ours, because we need to be able to adapt the core technology and techniques and software to all these different industries, which are quite specific.
To show you how naive I am about this, I got all excited a few years ago when I learned that all these delivery services are basically using right-hand turns, right?
Yep.
to increase
UPS Orion. Yep.
Was that there? Were they the first that sort of started that technique?
So yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but feel free to complete your thought, and then I'll give you a little.
No, I mean, it just makes so much sense. Less time waiting at traffic signals, therefore less fuel consumption, safer, faster, the whole bit, right? But and when you started, I think in 2017, there was no AI, right? So at that point, things were pretty manual. Sort of some manager of the fleet operations would say, okay, here's this route for you, and here's this route for you, and
well, I'll try to keep it as interesting as I can, but basically, there's a whole domain of operations research that has been studied for 70 years, probably seriously, in academia and companies, since the Industrial Revolution, right? Like moving things around in supply chain is the backbone of the global economy. Supply chain is like our operating system. So these things have been studied really, really in a lot of detail. And then, the example you gave of the right-hand turns is a wonderful one from UPS. UPS, after the advent of GPS technology in the early 2000s, late 90s, right? GPS wasn't really accessible to us in the public domain, but the U.S. government and other governments opened up these GPS satellites for use for private industry, and so all these logistics companies like UPS and FedEx, as USPS being really big ones, started using GPS. And once they had GPS, there were all these cool things that they could do that they couldn't previously do, like dynamically route a vehicle. And when I mean dynamically, I mean even
Yeah.
just like pre-planning for the day. Because before you had GPS, you really just couldn't do that. You'd give it to the driver and they'd have maps and a road atlas in their truck, and you'd be like, "Good luck,"
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Right.
know. But suddenly now, with the data source that GPS gives you and the operations algorithms that had been studied, they started to build these amazing innovations. And one of the outcomes of those innovations was the system called Orion that UPS built for their
Mm.
drivers internally. And that right-hand turn thing became a bit of a public knowledge, because they realized that sitting, waiting for a light to turn green and going over traffic on a left-hand turn could take a lot longer. But the key thing is there's no hard rule. It's not like three rights is always going to be better than a left.
Yeah.
Sometimes the left will be faster than the three right turns. So what we do and how we incorporate machine learning and AI, which machine learning was, a proper academic domain in 2017 when we started. And in fact, my co-founder is a PhD in machine learning, and that's how we got together, is to combine these kind of domains together. And so he taught me a lot about how you can take traditional algorithms, use amazingly rich data sources like real-time traffic-enabled GPS data. How
Hmm.
fast are cars actually going on the road right now? What's the traffic like in LA on the 5?
Yeah.
And then incorporate machine learning to then manage all of that into a truly dynamic delivery system that takes the efficiency of a vehicle, which traditionally in the US, UK, Australia, vehicles like delivery trucks will run on average only 60% full. That's just
Yeah.
an average, but showing you this
Mm.
40% overhead in that vehicle that could still be utilized. Now, with the creation of all of these complex AI-enabled systems, you can increase that to 80, even 90%. And that's an
Mm.
enormous financial gain for those companies, being able to do more work with the same resources. And
Yeah.
likewise, that reduces the emissions dramatically as well.
Very good. Very good. So, how did let's just go back a little bit in your life. You grew up in the States. I know you went to Northeastern, one of my
Yeah.
favorite colleges, in electrical engineering and computer engineering. Were you born and raised in New England?
Yeah, New Hampshire. So southern New Hampshire, Nashua, for anybody who's from that area. So southern border of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, about 40 minutes north of Boston.
And I'm just guessing it was some woman that lured you to Australia. But how did you get to Australia?
Ted, how dare you? How dare you be completely 100% accurate? Yeah, good guess, Ted. So yeah, it was actually my wife. We went to high school together in Nashua, and then
Oh, really?
we kind of went our separate ways for a little while. She went to BU, and then traveled and did work. Lived in Seattle and Ohio and some other places, Virginia. And then we got back together right as she got a job offer in Australia, and that lured me over here, and we moved here about 16 years ago.
And you just love it there, I take it.
Look, it's got its pros and cons, but it is a wonderful place to live. It's far from everything, which is the downside. But
Yeah.
especially now that we have kids and we have a young family that we're growing, it's a wonderful place to raise kids. The natural beauty and resources and the healthcare system and all these other wonderful things. It's just a idyllic place to live. Have you
And
been down here? Have you
I
visited?
just last year,
Oh,
yes,
cool.
went to Melbourne. I've learned to call it Melbourne. And, then we have family there, and then went down to Tasmania, which was a great thing, and then a little bit of time in Sydney, and then, all the way up to Darwin, pretty cool.
Wow.
I've been very impressed by Australia, but it's huge, right? And you've got
And the
I mean,
difference between Tasmania and Darwin, right? I mean, it couldn't be
oh,
more
yeah,
polar opposite.
yeah, yeah. So when you started your career, I think you were involved with medical devices and things like that?
True story, yeah. So electrical engineer and started working in med tech right out of uni, and for a company called Smith's Medical in Boston, and making infusion pumps and fluid warmers for infusion pumps and air detection clamps and all sorts of interesting, emergency room and operating theater technology. And then, yeah, when I moved to Australia, I started managing this little cardiology company here based out of Sydney, and providing cardiac stimulation equipment through big companies, through big international companies like GE Healthcare and Boston Scientific and J&J, this little Sydney company with 25 people, but distributing through those companies to 45 countries all over the world. And that was what really catalyzed my proper journey in entrepreneurship, because I dabbled in entrepreneurship and running a couple of businesses previously, and had like built a website company that I sold basically for a wash, like no profit, but I didn't lose. I dabbled in entrepreneurship before, but it was when I got here and I was managing that company. After a few years, I realized, wow, I know everything I need to know about founding and building a company. So why am I working for somebody else? Why not do it? So I have control over my future.
Yeah. And then I think I listened to a few podcasts with you, and I think one of your early thoughts was to come up with some sort of a software to try to link up people's jobs with where they live. I've always had the same thought. People are driving here in LA, of course. People are driving long distances to go and provide a service that they could be providing locally, right? I think you had an example where I can't remember, it was a family member or something that was
The
passing
sister,
by.
yeah.
The sister was passing by several stores very similar to the one that she ultimately got to. And you had this thought,
Yeah, I mean,
why on earth are we doing all this crisscrossing?
that's a really fun story, because that's how I met my co-founder. I went and found him to solve that problem, and then we ended up failing basically with that problem because it was too hard to integrate into human resources software. It was just the integration play was too hard. We weren't Being in Australia was tough because the software and startup investment market isn't as mature as other places. So there wasn't a lot of money available to us. So we only got so far after a couple of years. And then luckily it was Coca-Cola that said, hey, that's a really cool idea. Like the idea of optimizing people's location-based work to be more efficient and reduce their commutes.
Yeah.
Really cool. But it doesn't really like work for Coke. But we think you guys are clever and we've got these other problems in logistics. Do you think you could apply that knowledge and that framework? And they were very open-minded, and we did a couple of really short, small projects, but it proved the business case to them that there was this inefficiency in their logistics network. And then they basically encouraged us to then continue building out the solution that we sell today as Adiona. So yeah, it was all about really, well, and it brings me, Ted, to our key mission, which is we
Yeah.
want to decarbonize, we want to reduce costs, but as we develop AI, it's always humanistic. It's really important to us that we're improving society for the workforce, not just automating them away. And
Mhm.
so, that kind of ethos is from those very early days where we're trying to optimize people's commutes, because you wouldn't believe all the research that goes into the impact of commuting, especially on lower wage workers.
Yeah.
If you're a low wage worker, the longer your commute is, the more likely you are to be late, which means the
Yeah.
more likely you are to be fired, which means the more likely you are to commit a crime, and the more likely you are to then enter into the prison system. All based
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
correlation to how far you have to go to work. It's unbelievable, all these little
Oh,
things.
that's really interesting. And I do a lot of work on the efficiency of buildings. And when you look at the efficiency of a building in terms of electricity use and natural gas use, if you look at the commuting energy, it pretty much dwarfs the efficiency of the building. But let's talk a little bit about your business model. A client comes to you, uh, and how do you start off? Do they tell you obviously where their product is to begin with, and then they give you data as to all the places that it needs to be dropped off? What else are they giving you that you're putting into your software to optimize their routes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really like to distill it down to supply and demand, right? They've got customers that they need to get product to. That's the demand component of it. And then they've got inventory and warehouses and distribution centers and all these things that hold that
Mhm.
inventory that they need to then source it from, right? So all of the things that are relevant to that supply and demand relationship are the data that we need to then do what we do. So it tends to be, the size, the weight, the volume of the products. Is it palletized or is it loose parcels in a van? Where does it originate? What types of vehicles are they using? Are they using vans, trucks, bikes, cargo bikes,
Hmm.
walking? And are those vehicles electric? Are they experimenting with electric vehicles? One of the things we're really proud of is that the EV adoption rate is really low here in Australia, but it's starting to grow. But we developed the first electric vehicle routing solution in Australia, and only few in the world, because routing for electric vehicles is very different than diesel vehicles. So all that information is really important to then basically create a digital twin in our software solution that creates a model of their network. So you got supply, you've got demand, you've got the location, you've got the weight and volume, all these other, the fleet parameters, you got all that information in a digital twin. And the cool thing is then you can start to dream. You can start to simulate. You can say, well, this is what we're doing today, but what if we made these changes? Little
Mm.
ones, big ones, whatever. What is the impact going to be on our cost, on our emissions, on our customer service levels, our SLA compliance, and estimated time of arrivals? All these things, they simulate in our environment to then be able to better serve their customers at a lower cost and lower emissions.
And then how does your business model work then? You're charging them per drop off or per delivery, or explain that to me.
Yeah, typically it's per location they visit. And
Mhm.
that's very much by design. A lot of the old school software and SaaS that's on the market will charge people based on the number of trucks they have or the number of users that are using it and all that. But really, our unit economics for our business, our costs are incurred by use of cloud compute, use of AI, and the consumption of location data, meaning that it's not free to go out to know the data that we need of how the traffic flows are on the road, on the 5 right now. We need to source that. We need to buy that data
Yeah.
dynamically in real time, right? And there's all these other vendors out there beyond Google that have data like that you can buy.
Mm.
So our unit economics are really driven by, our costs are really driven by the number of locations we have to process in the
Yep.
system. And we simply pass that through to our customers and say, well, if you've got a huge delivery network and you're processing all these deliveries with all these locations, you're going to pay a little tiny slice for each one of those locations you process.
Mhm. Can you give an example? I bet you. No, you can. Can you give an example or two of a client that you worked with? You can name the client or not name the client, and just talk about the success of your software in creating efficiencies for that client.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've been very lucky, Ted, that a lot of our clients are so happy that they've done public case studies with us and things
Yeah.
like that, which is a blessing to share those stories as well. Um, a- and so, a couple of the examples would be we talked a little bit about Coke, and they had some really big early success. But lately, we've been talking a lot about Australia Post because it's such a big business here in Australia, and um, and the opportunity there is so huge, and we're incrementally delivering more value as we get to know them and we grow the relationship. But uh, two things that they've been able to do: one is to reduce the fleet size that they needed to do the deliveries, right? And that's cool. That's great. That is an efficiency win. And I actually can't tell you the numbers on that bit, but what I can tell you, and so important to our customers, and in the way that we sell the product, is they have gotten a 100x return on investment in increasing new revenue. So their ability to use that digital twin and that simulation environment, not just to decarbonize and be more efficient, but to be able to sell more delivery services to
Mm.
e-commerce companies, to parcel shippers, to all these other brands that they work with. Um, they've gotten a 100x uplift in
Wow.
revenue compared to
Wow.
what they spend on us. And 100x return on investment is kind of ludicrous in any environment. And then for them to be able to say that publicly and give us a pat on the back for it, these are the types of outcomes that we get really excited about delivering, because
Sure.
the financial efficiency and top line revenue growth are a means to decarbonization that we get so excited about.
And you mentioned, congratulations. You mentioned that you might influence the size of the trucks that they're rolling as well, right? Right. I mean,
Yeah, and
you take a
that's
look at
really
all the data, and you see, hey, you're just rolling too many vehicles, and they're only half full or whatever it is.
yeah, exactly. Like the ability to look at the fleet you have today, and then to be able to say, let's right size it. We're working with a client right
Yeah.
now, and we just did a meeting with them yesterday afternoon where it looks like there's going to be maybe a minimum 20 and maybe upwards of 30% reduction in their fleet size.
Hmm.
30% when you have, effectively 500 vehicles. It's enormous. So the savings are enormous. The other thing to really consider too is that supply chain and logistics is getting more expensive disproportionately because of increased labor costs.
Hmm.
Increased labor cost is because uh, people don't want to be drivers anymore. it's not an attractive industry to go and be a driver like it used to be. I think it was the number one, maybe still is the number one job for high school graduate males in the U.S. is truck driving.
Hmm.
But those numbers are going way, way down. And so as we've got e-commerce growth increasing, your driver pool is decreasing, so you pay more for those
Yeah.
drivers. Suddenly now, it's not just about the vehicles and the vehicle count and the vehicle size. It's about that entire stack of labor and maintenance and depreciation on top of that makes, that ability to either use smaller vehicles that are lower cost or use new breed electric vehicles that will save you a lot in the fuel chain over time. To be able to figure that out is really important to these businesses for their future survival.
Paint a picture of the way it was in the old days before before companies like you came along.
Well, and we're still a young company. We only went on market with this solution in 2021. So it's really been 5 years since we've been officially on market. And so a lot of these companies still are very paper-based. You'd be
Yeah.
shocked how many people are still running around. Well, and you see them even in LA, like you see a truck parked and they got sheets of paper all over the dashboard because they've got a paper manifest that's been printed out from a PDF that morning.
Right.
So, one of the early customers we were working with, they're a furniture delivery company, and they would have all their orders for the next day, and they would just send it out the night before to the drivers. The drivers would have to sequence the deliveries on the paper, like 1, 2, 3, 4, send it back to the company,
Yeah.
and then the company would print out a manifest and then tell the clients when they could expect delivery, all based on the driver's brain knowledge.
Yeah.
One of the guys that we started working with, one of the drivers, that I did a ride along with in the early days, one of our early clients, this guy hadn't had a vacation in 3 years. His truck cab was covered in Post-it notes, phone numbers, delivery addresses, all this stuff, right? Hadn't
Yeah.
had a vacation in 3 years. You know why? His route was so complicated that nobody could cover it. There was
Yeah.
so much still in his head. And so he was just begging for some kind of a digital solution, not to make him more efficient, but just so he could get a break.
It's a good story. Yeah. And it seems like one of the really attractive features of your service is that you can gauge pretty accurately what the arrival time will be, right?
And this is a huge shift in the market, right? Because of the Amazonification, the Amazon effects, and DoorDash and Uber and all this. Now people want to be able to look on a map and see where their delivery is at when it's
That's
coming
right.
to their house, and having like a really accurate ETA is just becoming table stakes.
Right. Gone are the days where they give you like a 4-hour window. Well, we'll try to get there sometime in the afternoon. And you're
You
just sort of
remember
sitting
those
around
days, right?
waiting.
Where you're getting
Oh,
a new
sure.
a new appliance delivered, and they'd be like, "Well, just be there all day. We'll show
Yeah.
up when we show up." And then sometimes
Yeah.
they wouldn't even show up on that day.
So are you now throughout Australia, or what is your service territory at this point?
Yeah, we are throughout Australia, New Zealand, and we're working in Southeast Asia. We've also got pilots going in the US, so we're expanding
Oh, you
into
do?
the US. Yep, very exciting. It's a global solution, meaning that the only limitation in using it in any country in the world is accessibility to the data, which we pretty much have global coverage of now. So honestly, the main limitation is just us, the fact that we're small and growing, and there's not enough of us to go around.
Right, right. So what and what is the business plan? Is it just to keep on growing, or do you shift into different sectors, or what's the
Yeah,
plan?
that's a great question. We do have other verticals that we want to branch into eventually, but I think we need to accelerate on these kind of core verticals now. So FMCG, cold chain, parcels are the strategic ones that I think we can get enough revenue, grow the business big enough to then start to geographically expand and also expand more into other areas like waste management,
Mm.
pharmaceuticals, field service workforces, field engineering, things like that. There's a lot to be done, so we're really excited.
So I was thinking about bus routes, just as I was preparing for this, just thinking, are the bus routes fairly antiquated, or are they really based on data of actual riders? What do you think about that? I know that's
There's a
not
lot
in
of
your.
good technology in buses. I'd say actually one of the bigger problems in the bus market right now, or bus
Mhm.
technology market, is the electric bus problem.
Just the
It's
range
very
issue.
well. Yeah, range and repeatability and reliability and charge times and cycles and things like that. So I live right down the street from the Southern Hemisphere's largest electric bus depot. And if you ride the bus frequently, riding electric buses is awesome. It's so good. It's so quiet, and like it's just an amazing experience. So there's a lot of countries that are investing a lot of money in electrifying their buses, but that again, that planning step, a lot of the technology is very much based on a diesel bus that can go all day on a single tank and
Yeah.
not have to worry about refueling. The electric bus battery quite there yet, and might not ever be there yet because they're just such big vehicles. So that's a big limitation now as well.
Talk about how let's go back to your biz, more closely to your biz, but talk about how you are influencing your clients towards electric vehicles. And of course, you got the range issue, which is very real, but
Yep.
you got less maintenance costs on electric vehicles, less emissions, quieter, the whole bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that's a really interesting question, Ted. I'm glad you brought it up because when we talk about that desire for efficiency and right sizing the fleet, what's happening in the market commonly, because we work with a lot of electric vehicle consultancies and advisors and things like that. What's happening in the market is quite often the customer and the client, the transporter, the brand will look at electric vehicles as just an alternative one-to-one swap for the vehicles they
Yeah.
have today.
Yeah.
And that's not the right way to look at it. The right way to look at it is if you're considering a new powertrain, you have to consider the entire network. And that is a good time to consider right sizing your fleet, because you are going to pay more upfront for an electric vehicle, but most likely you're also going to save a lot on the running cost over time. And because we talked about labor costs is huge, and insurance and maintenance and all that, if you can reduce the number of vehicles you actually need, suddenly there's a lot more on the table dollar-wise to
Yeah.
invest in electric ones that are going to get you a payback, but it's going to take you a couple years. So that's where there's this interesting synergy between right-sizing the fleet, simulating what the best the fleet should be, difference in new powertrain vehicles like electric and hydrogen that may have a higher upfront cost, but when you fast forward 5 years, you've now actually saved more because you reduced the vehicle count, and now you're getting the payback in that total cost of ownership.
It makes sense. And then autonomous vehicles. I'm sure you're excited about that development. There must be unique complexities with deliveries services. I mean, how do you take the parcel out of the truck and take it to the warehouse or take it to the home? Where do you see the opportunities for autonomous vehicles in this kind of delivery service that we're talking about?
Well, that's also a great question because it relies on the convergence of three separate technologies, which I'm following really closely, which is AI, autonomous vehicles, and robotics. And I say robotics in a very general sense because
Hmm.
you can imagine a world where there's a swarm of large vehicles, say whether they're autonomous or not, that can drive throughout a city. They're street legal vehicles carrying parcels or food or whatever. And then you have some kind of robotic solution, whether it's a wheeled robot or a bipedal or a multi-pedal robot. Again, it's robotic though, that's going
Yeah.
to need to then maneuver what we call the last meter. You got the
Yeah.
last mile, which is getting the van to your house, but how do you navigate that last meter from the sidewalk to your doorstep or whatnot, right? And that's where the robotics could be all sorts of different permutations. And then all of that requires orchestration. And we're covering one part of that orchestration with the software network, basically the digital twin of that environment to drive all of these decisions. And then you need also, though, the kind of real-time edge compute layer of AI that adapts to things in real time and real decisions. So that's the challenge and why it's taken so long, and why, as much as Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk want to talk about it having already been here,
Yeah.
it's three different technologies that need to converge into one really beautifully orchestrated and very robust, safe, regulatory compliant solution to make it work. But I do actually think that that's coming
Yeah.
within 10 years. years.
Within 10 years. We've just got a couple minutes left. Results to date, and I'm really focused on the efficiency. From your website, you have 807,000 gallons of fuel, 9.7 million miles avoided, 7.2 million kilograms of CO2 avoided being released into the atmosphere. That's got to feel pretty good, those results.
It's awesome. If you can get up every day and see numbers like that, it's really motivating. And look, we all generally, most people want to do better by the environment, and I think I still do silly little things, probably like the $3 optimizations of trying to figure out where to put my green waste, and I have a worm farm, and all these little things that, let's face it, are kind of rounding errors in the grand scheme of things. But
Yeah.
I think we all at Adiona get really excited when we can see numbers like that, and we go, oh, we're contributing an outsized impact for our size and for what we do, and if we can continue to scale that, it's just a win-win.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Richard.
Thanks for having me, Ted. Really appreciate the time and thoughtful conversation.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's EcoLogic. We'll see you next time.